Explore Moon to Mars, Landing Humans on the Moon. My name is Latina Taylor. I'm a NASA EPDC education specialist with NASA's STEM Engagement and Educated Professional Development Collaborative, EPDC, over at Texas State University. So I'm going to kick this off with this really amazing video. I really like it. It's about a minute video, and it's titled "Dreamed of This." And when we talk about the next frontier, right? It isn't just for the next generation. It's for this generation. And with our Artemis programs, we will land the first woman and the next person of color on the moon, which is so exciting to say. And so let's take a look at this really quick video. It's quite inspirational, called Dreamed of This.
And as we leave the moon, we leave as we came, and God willing, as we shall return.
You probably dreamed of this.
Liftoff on Apollo 11.
You probably replayed this moment 1,000 times. You probably imagined the awe-inspiring, indescribable rush of the ride. You probably celebrated the miraculous, cheered the momentous, and mourned the shocking. You probably still dream of what could be. We did. We do. And while many thought we were through, no. We've been learning, we've been building, we've been training. And now, it's time. Because the next frontier is not just for the next generation. It's for this generation. It's for me, and it's for you. For everything we still dream about. We go as Artemis.
Agenda. We will first discuss NASA's Artemis missions to the Moon and Mars. Then we will review the next generation science standards and discuss how does engineering design actually fit within the NGSS. We'll then take a look at a NASA STEM engagement educator guide called Landing Humans on the Moon. And then we'll take a closer look at one engineering design challenge within that educator guide that engages students in building a model of a lunar lander using general low-cost materials, low-cost, low-budget materials. And then we'll wrap up reviewing some NASA EPDC resources, webinars, and digital badges for both educators and students. At the close of today's webinar, you'll be able to download a PDF version of this entire slide deck presentation. And you also get a chance to access a lot of the documents that you see here, the Landing Humans on the Moon Educator Guide, as well as some other supplement resources that I included that literally connect to this particular educator guide and the activities within that guide. You'll be able to download all of those things right here within the webinar and to the Adobe Connect, because I uploaded everything to Adobe Connect. But I'm also going to give you a link, a Google Drive link, where you can access all of the documents as well as the slide deck presentation. So now what we're going to do right now is go travel back in time. I love showing this slide to students, especially the primary students, because the first thing they say is, well, what is that? What are those? Like, these are newspapers. This was our Facebook news feed back in the day, right? And so as we can see, we're going to travel back to July 20th, 1969. And this day, as you can see, was headlined in newspapers all across our country as a historic moment in American history. And what happened? Well, we landed on the moon. Neil Armstrong took the first small step for man and a giant leap for mankind when he walked on the moon. I want to give you a little history here. The primary objective of the Apollo 11 missions what was actually a national goal that was set by President John F. Kennedy at the time. And the goal was basically and I'm saying basically, but listen to this goal, perform a crewed lunar landing on the moon and then return back home. So that was the goal. And here we have Commander Neil Armstrong, Command Pilot Michael Collins, Lunar Module Pilot Edward Buzz Aldrin. Here they're pictured here. And one thing to note is that over 650 million people watched this televised event and heard the voice, heard his voice as he described the event as he was taking that one small step for man and a giant leap for mankind. This link here is a sound file to those infamous words, but I'm going to even do you something a little bit better. I'm going to take you to this really amazing clip here where it talks about landing on the moon. And remember, the activity that the kids that I'm going to highlight today is about creating a lunar lander. So this is a really nice video that you can actually show prior to engaging kids in the actual activity. So let's take a look at this really quick video, Apollo 11 landing on the moon.
Okay, let's go there, Capcom on the hot fire. Okay, all flight controllers going around the horn, gonna go for undocking. Okay, retro, go. Fido, go. Guide, go. Control, go. Telcom, go. Jinsei, go. Ecom, go. Surgeon, go. Capcom, we're go for undocking.
Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins arrived at the moon on Saturday, July 19th.
When we did get close and we rolled out and saw it for the first time, it was a revelation. It was gigantic. It filled our entire window.
The next day, Sunday, July 20th, was landing day.
In a lot of anticipation, we finally come to the day, the moment that this is about to commence.
Landing on the moon was absolutely the most difficult piece of any Apollo mission, okay? Think about it as a controlled fall out of lunar orbit. The problem is, in this controlled fall out of orbit, you only have enough fuel for one try.
Capcom, we're go for landing. Altitude 4,200.
Houston, you're a go for landing, over.
The trajectory had been wrong. They were targeted into this inhospitable place. Then they had to fly over this area at a high forward velocity, then pitch up to slow down so that kill their forward velocity, and then start down like a helicopter. So now we're critical fuel state, and that's why the 60-second call was given, and then the 30-second call.
Then I really got nervous, was calling out 25 seconds of fuel left, and then 20 seconds of fuel. Oh, jeez.
Okay, engine stop. APA at a descent. Mode control both auto, descent engine command override off. Engine arm off. 413 is in. We copy you down, Eagle. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
The landing to me was a great celebration. The nation was almost euphoric.
Well, it proved that the United States could accomplish tremendous goals if they worked together as a team.
And this is another video. I'm not going to play this one, but this is another one that gives you it's called Apollo 11 Moonwalk Montage. And it gives, those infamous words, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, but it also gives a lot of history in this video as well. So that video, again, the one I just showed is a really great way to jumpstart the activity that we'll be engaging the kids in, or that I'll be highlighting today. Now let's move back to the future. Okay, and we're going back to the moon, and I want you to meet the rocket, the Space Launch System SLS rocket, and the Orion spacecraft that's going to get us there. We're going back to the moon to stay, and we're going with the Artemis missions. Artemis is an ongoing space mission currently run by NASA with the goal of landing the first female astronaut and the first astronaut of color on the moon's south pole by the end of this decade. Artemis, in Greek mythology, is the twin sister of Apollo. Back in the day, we had the Apollo missions. Apollo is the god of the sun. Well, this is just so fitting because, Artemis is the goddess of the moon, and the goddess of hunt. And so during this next era of human exploration, we will discover life-saving, earth-changing science, and innovative technologies along the way. This whole Moon and Mars mission, or this plan, involves building a brand new space station that will orbit the moon, and eventually a habitable moon base. We haven't gone to the moon since Apollo 17. That was in 1972. So literally over 50 years ago. And speaking of habitable moon base, meet the Gateway. The Gateway, will be literally our home away from home. This is where the astronauts will live and stay, and be our kind of like our outposts. This is where our Orion spacecraft will post up, and astronauts will be able to transport from there to the human landing system that will then land on the moon. But I'm going to talk more about the lunar lander system piece in a moment. You can also see that we have several international partners that have already signed on and agreed to be a part of the engineering and the building and the construction of the Gateway. Every NASA center contributes to Artemis. As you can see here, the map of our 10 NASA centers, including NASA headquarters and additional facilities, again, that are all a part of bringing us back to the moon and to Mars and beyond. When you take a look at this image, one thing you want, what literally pops out at you. And if you can put something if you can put your ideas in the chat box, that'll be great. Just taking a look at that image, and being able to show that to students. What do you think that they will say? Female, yeah. A woman astronaut. We go as the Artemis generation. This link here is an amazing, another amazing video. I'm not going to show. It's about 2 minutes in play. I'm gonna put the link in here for you guys, but it gives you a nice little introduction to the Artemis theme and the Artemis mission, but giving kids a chance to see a picture like this, and then seeing women in particular talk about us going back to the moon. Again, this is one of the key goals of the Artemis mission, sending that first female astronaut and the first person of color to the moon, and which is an amazing goal. Let's take a look at our astronauts. NASA selected an initial group of NASA astronauts to help pave the way for our next lunar missions, including sending the first woman. So one of them will be the first woman, and one of them will be the first person of color to walk on the lunar surface for the first time in over 50 years. And these astronauts were chosen from the most diverse group of astronauts in history. And they bring such a wide range of experiences, life experiences, and skill sets to the missions. Some are medical doctors, marine biologists, submarine officers, test pilots, geologists. Right now they are training. They are getting ready. They're conducting flight readiness training. Which helps to maintain their critical thinking skills. With activities like spacewalking, robotics, T-38 flight training. And so, these are our astronauts that will be our first group that will get us there. Take a look at Orion. For the first time in a generation, NASA has built a human spacecraft for deep space missions. And it's named after one of the actual largest constellations in the night sky. And this spacecraft is actually drawing on more than 50 years of spaceflight research and development. And it's designed to meet the evolving needs of our nation's deep space exploration programs for decades to come. Orion will serve as the exploration vehicle that will carry the space, will actually carry the crew to space, provide emergency abort capability, and sustain astronauts during their missions. And then last but not least, provide safe re-entry. We got to get back home. Safe re-entry from deep space return velocities. Here's another picture of Orion. Orion is designed to accommodate 99% of the human population. Which is really large. It actually can accommodate astronauts as small as a 4'10" female or as tall as a 6'5" male. And it actually provides more than 30% more cubic volume space than the Apollo capsules. And so just one thing to know, the Apollo capsule carried up to 3 astronauts. Well, this particular Orion spacecraft carries up to 4 astronauts. Where was Orion built? Great question. I believe, I'm not even going to guess. Orion, I believe, was built in where they build the rockets. It's either in at the Stennis Space Center, which is in Mississippi, or it could be at the NASA Johnson Space Center. But when you look at the video, I will let you know, the next video, I will let you know where exactly is it being built. Where was it built? I'm not sure if it's Indianapolis, but I will get back to you on that. Okay, give me one moment. Okay, SLS. Now we're talking the most powerful rocket in the world. Artemis missions will launch from NASA's modernized spaceport center over at Kennedy Space Center in Florida, on the agency's new, most powerful heavy lift rocket Space Launch System, or SLS. And this rocket literally is designed for deep space missions. And if you take a look, I'm gonna give you a little closer look up at them, which I love. I love this image of it. It has 4 big main sections. It stands about 400 feet tall. That orange area, that's the core stage. And it holds about 733,000 gallons of propellant, enough to power the 4 RS-25 engines for 8 minutes. And it literally sends the rocket soaring at 17,000 miles per hour, which is incredible. Those 2 white solid boosters, they're about 17 stories tall, and they generate about 3.6 million pounds of thrust. This baby is an amazing thing to see. I actually got a chance to see it in person, which was Oh, Google says New Orleans. Yeah, so I figured that so the New Orleans piece is either the and I'm going back to Megan's question about where Orion was built. That must be the Stennis Space Center um, over at the cusp of the Mississippi and New Orleans or Louisiana. Um, I guess that's the center, Stennis. But thank you, Megan, for going back and finding that. So that's NASA's SLS. A little bit more about another amazing image of SLS in action. And again, this is the only rocket in the world that can carry that Orion spacecraft, which is at the top. At the top of there, that's where the Orion spacecraft sits, and again, we're actually looking to test this rocket and the Orion spacecraft in November. So more to come. And we're actually going in phases, and so SLS and Orion, they're actually a part of a larger lunar campaign. The first phase to get humans back to the moon. Artemis 1 will be the first integrated test flight of NASA's deep space exploration systems over at Kennedy, the Orion spacecraft, and the SLS rocket. And so, it will be an uncrewed mission, which is what I was just speaking of. We're going to actually test it in November. And it will provide the foundation for us as we get to land on the moon, to get back to the moon and beyond. And so I want you to take a look at this image a little bit. This is Artemis 1. So what will happen really with Artemis 1 is that after one orbit around the Earth, the Orion spacecraft will literally fly through the Van Allen radiation belts, where it will experience high amounts of radiation. And it's going to take about 4 days for the Orion spacecraft to actually get to the moon. And once it's there, it's actually going to fly 40,000 miles beyond the moon, which is further than we did with the Apollo missions. And I spent about 6 days in the vicinity of the moon before beginning its 4-day return back. And again, the trajectory for the Artemis 1 test flight will be, it looks like November 14th. Okay, Artemis 2. And so, this will be the crewed lunar flyby. And, it's the first time that we've had humans to the moon in the 21st century. That's amazing to say. And they're going to be aboard the SLS rocket and the Orion spacecraft. And on this 10-day crewed test flight, the NASA astronauts will literally set a record for the furthest human travel from Earth ever. And so while they're out there, they're going to be validating deep space communications and the navigation systems. They're going to ensure all their life support systems are in tune and keeping them healthy and safe. We're going to have up to 4 astronauts in tow on the Orion spacecraft. And this will literally be the Artemis generation's Apollo 8 moment. That moment where those astronauts aboard Orion will get a chance to see a full globe of the Earth from afar as their backdrop. And so they're going to spend some time, and they're going to be flying about 60 miles above the moon's surface. They're not going to land. Again, we're testing everything out to make sure that everything's working right and bring them back home safely. And then we're going to have Artemis 3. Now we've got all this confidence that we've gained, through our Artemis 1 and Artemis 2 missions. Orion and its crew will once again travel to the moon. This time, they're going to board a human landing system that will bring them to the surface. They're going to bring that first woman and that first person of color to the moon's surface. And I wonder, what will those first words be what would those astronauts say? We had our, Apollo astronauts, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. What will our Artemis astronauts say when they abort the human landing system that's going to get them, to the moon? When we talk about the human landing system, the lunar surface is a treasure trove of science, and humans have only explored a small portion of it so far. And at the South Pole, we will study, the extreme environments and all types of things, that lie ahead, and at that area. NASA has awarded SpaceX to contract. They've awarded them a contract to develop the human landing system. The picture that you see here that will put those two astronauts on the moon, those first two astronauts on the moon. And so it will serve as a habitat, for them, and it will house equipment, and it will be where they will store their sample collections and their scientific experiments, and all their activities like moonwalks, etc. So again, this will be kind of their home on the moon when we get there. Here's some of the things that the Artemis astronauts will do. They're going to search for the moon's water, use it. They will study the discoveries of the moon. We're going to be learning how to live and work on another celestial body where our home is just 3 days away. And then test technologies, new technologies before even thinking about, how we're going to get to Mars, which that trip could take it's about 3 years round trip. And here's a picture of, of what the Artemis base camp, could look like. So each Artemis mission, we're going to be testing spacesuits and habitats and landers and systems. Again, all that's going to prepare us for Mars. And each time we visit the surface, we want to stay longer. Again, we're going to be living and working on another planet or another celestial body, which will help us prepare, for Mars, which is our next step. Yeah. And everything we do and everything that we learn during the Artemis missions will pave the way for our human missions on Mars, to Mars and beyond. I want you to think about this. The students in our classrooms, our kids in our classrooms today, they are a part of NASA's Artemis generation. They are our next generation of innovators, explorers, scientists, technologists, engineers, mathematicians. They will be developing these new technologies that will help pave the way to propel us to Mars and beyond. And so, we never know, who will, those kids in our classroom that will be inspired, to help us, get to explore these new frontiers. Let's take a look at this video, NASA's plans to travel to the moon and beyond.
Three, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff.
Artemis 1 will lift off from Launch Pad 39B at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida with 8.8 million pounds of thrust, provided by the most powerful rocket in the world, our Space Launch System rocket, or SLS. The uncrewed flight will be the first integrated test of SLS, our new Orion spacecraft, and exploration ground systems at Kennedy. Artemis 1 will send Orion beyond the moon, 280,000 miles from Earth, farther than any human spacecraft has ever flown.
This is not NASA doing this. This is the United States of America doing this program, the Artemis program, and there are companies all across our country that have a part in it, so there is kind of this wave of excitement being generated just by saying, we're going back to the moon.
After the upper stage of the rocket separates from Orion, the upper stage will deploy small satellites over several days to perform science experiments and technology demonstrations. Orion will make its multi-day outbound trip to the moon, propelled by a service module provided by the European Space Agency. Engineers will test Orion's systems on the way to the moon. Then, Orion will fly about 60 miles above the lunar surface, using the moon's gravity and engines on the service module to enter a lunar orbit. After about a month and a total distance of over 1 million miles, Orion will return home, faster and hotter than any spacecraft has before. A primary goal of Artemis 1, ensure Orion safely returns to Earth before we fly with humans. When we do, we'll build our capability for sustainable lunar exploration, preparing us for missions farther into the solar system.
Initially, what we'd like to do is start establishing a presence on the moon. So we're going to establish going back there on a regular basis, and then we'll end up setting up Gateway, and we would launch to the Gateway, and from Gateway, land on the surface of the moon.
We are there for, weeks, months on end. And there, we're going to be able to test out all the hardware and the habitats and the hatches and the suits and the rovers that'll allow us to prove out those technologies. The moon will lead the way to Mars, and we should be there within the next couple of decades.
Okay, so you want to know more about the Artemis missions, and it's when we talk about exploring Moon to Mars, and specifically Artemis 1, you can see I put a little red arrow there. This site here, this is NASA's Moon to Mars website. It is your one-stop shop for everything a moon to Mars, Gateway, humans on the moon, getting there. Let's see, preparing people to go, SLS and Orion. So if you want to know even more about going and seeing about more information about Orion and SLS, you definitely want to go to this site too. Again, it's nasa.gov/topics/moon to Mars. It has videos, pictures, interesting facts, live data, you name it. Again, your one-stop stop. So check that site out. Let's put our teacher's hat on for a moment. Okay, as we put our teacher's hat on, we're going to take a look at what I like to call student learning goals. Now, my slide looks a little different, but I'm going to talk through this slide a little bit because this is all about students creating learning goals. Explicitly stated learning goals give students a way to think and talk about what they've learned. Goals actually make it easier for students to know what they know. And as students, know what they know, they get a chance to communicate it, what they know to others. And here we want to help students make sense out of how rockets or in this case, lunar landers work, as they design and build their own model of a lunar lander, and kind of understand how lunar landers can assist humans in the exploration of space. And then we also want to help students make sense and analyze and interpret astronomical phenomena. Phenomenon that they might read about in the news or see on the internet or look up on YouTube, because new discoveries in astronomy are part of our everyday world today. And so I just spoke of scientific phenomenon, well, what is this? Phenomenon is simply an observable event. And in a science classroom, a carefully chosen phenomenon can drive that student inquiry. And when I think of the word inquiry, I give it a visual. I see students asking questions and then students seeking answers to those questions. And so when you center science education on phenomenon that students are motivated to explain or learn about, it actually shifts that learning from I'm learning about something to I'm figuring out how or why something happens. It is the phenomenon plus the student generated questions about the phenomenon that helps drive that learning and the teaching. And so if you want to know more about phenomenon learning or phenomenon, how to bring that into your classroom, there's a really great site here, thewonderofscience.com/phenomenal. Great site as a resource. You also want to think about, how do we, begin to engage or, motivate or inspire kids to get started with, learning about building a lunar lander or, going to the moon, right? And so one thing you can do is ask questions, have kids, a big question. What do you know about the moon? Or what do engineers do? How do lunar landers assist humans on the moon? Let's make this just a little interactive. How do you think that your students will respond to any of these questions? What do you know about the moon? How about we start with that one? What do you know about the moon? How do you think your students will respond to that? You could put some ideas in the chat box as you are thinking. And so as kids are, thinking about questions like that, what do you know? You can write the word moon on the board. And ask students, how would they describe the moon? They can record their comments in their science and technology notebooks. Okay, we see it has phases. There are craters. It comes out at night. It causes the tides. It circles the earth. Yes, all these things, they will want to know, right? Or they think that they know, right? And then maybe they're moving it to, what do you want to know? Then that piques that phenomenon piece or that inquiry piece. They can draw a picture of the moon, keep it open-ended. What do you think the moon, how do you think it helps us on the planet, that it's very dusty? Yeah, all these kinds of things. And so the question to you is, actually as I go into that, what are we doing? We're doing what's called activating prior knowledge, right? What do you want to know? What do you know? What do you want to know? And then what have you learned? This here, Moon Munchies, is an amazing educator guide that has these documents and more about getting kids to learn more about the moon and about the phases and all the things that they have questions about. And so why do we do this? Why do we activate prior knowledge? Why do we do this? Students, they bring what we call funds of knowledge into the classroom, which, includes their background knowledge, their experiences, their skill sets that they use just to navigate through their day. And oftentimes a great way to hook them is through that background knowledge. And when we acknowledge background knowledge as, valuable assets, we're actually creating what's called an optimal learning environment for them. And oftentimes, sometimes for students of color, this use of background knowledge are sometimes, overlooked or underutilized, And as a result, we're actually missing out on the chance to support that rigorous learning. We want to, use these funds of knowledge, right? This is just some research on that. But going back to this page here, you can also engage them in doing some research, especially for our younger ones. It's never too soon for our kids going and looking up facts and finding out information. And this site here, NASA Space Place, is an amazing site where kids can get that information that's at their level. So check out Space Place as well for you as another resource. A little bit about the engineering design process. Let's take a look at NASA's best engineering design process. When we talk about, an engagement, right? What we do is we provide students opportunities, to learn about, what does it take to be an engineer? If we want our students to think more like scientists and engineers, we let them know that engineers utilize a process. to guide them, as they, as they are solving problems, and they use a series of steps as they're solving these problems. And this is the engineering design process. And what we do is, as educators, we engage them in an activity that help them to understand this process. So they're presented with a challenge or problem, and they use the process and work in teams to complete activities and experiments to develop solutions to the original problem. And then them engaging in something like this facilitates teamwork, problem solving, brainstorming, and all these ideas are similar to the real work that engineers encounter on a daily basis. And we'll come back and talk about more about this process in particular. And so when we talk about standards within the NGSS, there, if you take a look at the 3 dimensions here, which I actually love this image because it actually breaks down the 3 dimensions of the Next Generation Science Standards framework, which we talk about the practices, and this is what scientists and engineers do. What do they do to, what do the scientists do to discover or investigate the natural world? And then what do engineers do to design and build systems? So those are where those practices live. And then you have your disciplinary core ideas. Well, this is what the scientists know. This is their content knowledge. And with the way NGSS has designed it, they actually build on each other as they progress through the grade levels. And then they're broken into 4 domains. You have your physical science, your life science, your earth and space science, and engineering design. So engineering design is a part of what students should know and be able to do. That's our standards, right? Then you have your cross-cutting concepts. Well, this describes how scientists or students think and link to those core ideas. So when you have concepts like cause and effect, this is made explicit to students so it can help them to develop a more coherent and scientifically based view of the world around them. Going back, this screenshot here, this is again one of my favorite sites, NASA Space Place. Well, here is not only a place that for kids where you can, kids can get information, but it's also for educators. It helps educators build lesson plans that align to the Next Generation Science Standards and to the science phenomenon and the engineering design practices as well. And so, just going a little bit deeper with the engineering design process, and it's like, why? I know a lot of teachers like, why do we have to teach engineering now? What is going on? Why? And the NGSS has an amazing Appendix I. And I'm actually going to add this to the resources that you should be able to take a look. It's a really great read. It's about a 2-page read. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hone in on this italicized paragraph here, which kind of helps to answer that question, why engineering? And it says here, science and engineering practices in a K-12 schooling should help students see how science and engineering are instrumental in addressing major challenges that confront our society today, like generating sufficient energy, preventing and treating diseases, maintaining supplies of clean water and food, and then solving problems of global environmental change. So these are issues that affect us today. And it's also important to note that, within these standards, students are demonstrating their understanding of science through the application of engineering practices. So the science is being discovered and uncovered through these engineering and science practices. This video here, one of my favorites, especially when you want to help introduce engineering to our students, so they can kind of understand why do we need engineers? Why do we need them? What is this career? Why is this important? Let's take a look at To Engineer is Human.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
Keen minds will be needed with the best possible college education.
But you know what we can really use is some more scientists and some more engineers who are building and making things.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Okay, I'm not sure. I'm sorry that about the pausing in the video. I'm not sure what that was about, but it's all good. I gave you the link in there so you can access it too. And remember, you will have access to this entire slide deck with all of the resources embedded. You know, one thing you want to, you know, when you're talking to kids about, you know, engineers, you know, and why we need them, you know, a simple way to introduce it is anything that is built must first be engineered and planned out. Engineers want to know how and why things work the way that they do. They work to design solutions to our problems, human problems, animal problems, planetary problems, space problems. They are working to make our lives easier, not more difficult. You know, and when I talk to kids, especially younger kids, I tell them, I said, I think engineers are superheroes of today, because wherever there's a problem, we have a team of engineers that's working to solve our problems, and kids can relate to that. And so then we introduce them to the engineering design process, where there's a problem and they're imagining solutions and planning things out by creating a sketch or a design. They're putting it into creation, actually creating it, and then testing their ideas out to see if their ideas are working. And if it's not working, let's see how we can make improvements on it. And sometimes that means going back to that plan, doing some more creation and more testing, so they're finally ready to share and communicate their results to everyone. Let's take a look at the NASA STEM activity and educator guide, Landing Humans on the Moon. This comes from Next Gen STEM. These are standard aligned activities to help students learn more about sending humans to the moon. These are some amazing educator guides. You can see all 6 of them there, but we're going to focus our energies on one particular educator guide called Landing Humans on the Moon, which includes 4 standards aligned, NGSS standards aligned activities to help students learn more about the moon as they create a model of a human landing system for the lunar surface. They're going to be using science, engineering, geometry, and all these things to design, build, and test a model spacecraft. And with these particular activities, you can see here, like for example, the first one, choosing their landing site. They're going to be selecting an appropriate landing site on the South Pole by using some of NASA's maps and images and data, and then come up with a real plan. Then they're going to also create a scale replica of the portion of a moon's surface that could be, again, the ideal landing site, using geological features of the moon. And then priority packing. They're going to be, look at that, evaluate. That's that higher order critical thinking. Evaluate and prioritize items for survival on the moon. And then describe how they can actually optimize a packing solution, for their supplies. And then finally, the activity 4 is where what we will be focused on is safe landing on the moon, where they're going to be designing a model of a lunar lander that will basically use the thrust of balloons to slow its rate of descent. And if you go back to that video, right, that video where it was a slow descent, a safe descent to land on the moon, well, that's what they're going to be doing. They're going to be modeling that. They're going to be creating this lander that will slow it down and keep it safe, keep that vehicle safe, and keep those astronauts safe. And so we're going to talk more about what that activity looks like even more. So here, this is just, what the educator guide looks like. One thing you want to know is about, particular about the format here, the pages offer amazing strategies to help motivate students and help set that stage for learning. The student pages give really great background information, suggested steps for students to take as they go through the engineering design process, data tables to complete, and questions to help guide their thinking. There's also extension activities that are also, included. And one thing you want to note is that students receive the challenge requirements and the constraints and the materials, and there are no specific instructions or recipes. Students literally work together and come up with the best solution. And so that format, you have your teacher pages with the objectives and the process skills, the required materials, the design challenge in itself. It gives you a really great overview, and the NASA mission connection, right? The NASA mission connection is definitely embedded. The student pages, they give you, again, give the kids background information, on the NASA missions. They receive the constraints, and then you give them the materials. But again, they come up with the best solution as a team. In this process, it could be, a little challenging, for teachers and for students at first. But once students start thinking this way, it just becomes a natural part of, their daily way of solving problems. Here, this is your National STEM Standards alignments. So you can see how it aligns to the NGSS, the technology ISTE standards, your mathematics standards, and in some cases, the computer science standards. But for this here, this particular suggested pace for this particular lesson or activity is about 1 to 2 hours. Also, you can see the STEM disciplines matrix here, and it just gives you it gives you an alignment to see how each activity within this particular educator guide aligns to the STEM standards. Here, if you look at the focus here, we have our science NGSS core disciplinary core ideas, our technology standards, the engineering standards or practices, and then the math standards. If you look at safe landing on the moon, you can see, what standards this one actually addresses. And so just giving you the goals and objectives for this particular activity, safe landing on the moon. So here, oh, and by the way, I need to say that the pictures that you see are my students that I have been going around the country engaging kids with this particular activity. So I've had a lot of experience with this particular activity. Kids really get into it, literally. So these are real pictures of kids engaged in the activity. So the goal for here is the students will be using the engineering design process to identify the challenges of landing a lunar lander on the surface of a body without an atmosphere. So that's a big challenge. without an atmosphere, without any air or anything coming in. So, because the first thing the kids think about are parachutes. Okay, it's the first. I've got everybody wants to build a parachute. So they have to know that background that the moon doesn't have an atmosphere, and so also design. They're going to also design, build, and improve. That's so important. The improvement piece. Because they need to go back. Because if at first you don't succeed, you got to try again. Improve that model of that lander that can slow its descent using the thrust of the balloons, the downward thrust of the balloons. And then as they're doing these things, they're going to be graphing the speed with respect to elevation of the model lunar lander. Now, let's put our student hat on. Okay. And this is kind of, how you want to introduce this to your kids. This is your challenge. You will work in teams to design and build a model of a lunar lander that will use the thrust of balloons to slow its rate of descent. The goal of this challenge is to slow the lander's rate of descent as much as possible to simulate a soft landing on the lunar surface. You will drop your landers from a height of about 2 meters, okay, without the use of propulsion. And you're going to use your stopwatches or slow motion video or any type of analysis, software to measure the effect of propulsion that it has on your lunar lander. And then finally, you're going to be making improvements, making design changes, going back and taking a look how you can improve your lander and its performance. One big question I get all the time from the kids, they say, I don't know why they're asking this question, but this is what they say. Is NASA and space, are they friends? NASA and SpaceX, are they friends? I'm like, are they friends? Yeah, they're friends, and then I tell them, as a matter of fact, SpaceX is developing our human landing system that will carry the first NASA astronauts to the surface of the moon, under the Artemis program. And so, I've actually put that in there, this picture in the presentation to help, kids understand what a new lunar lander could look like, what SpaceX is up to help us, as educators. We have a responsibility. We have a huge responsibility to introduce 21st century STEM careers to our students early on, so that their perceptions of scientists, technologists, engineers, and mathematicians mirror what these STEM professionals look like today. And as we introduce STEM, careers to our students, we're offering potential pathways to their future. So we want to expose them, to new job titles, engage them in the real work that this job title might experience. For example, if we're exposing kids to coding, it helps them to build an understanding that if they learn to code, they could be a programmer, computer programmer, or a video game developer, and then maybe meet, a real person that's actually doing the work, right? Here we have Dr. April Erickson Jackson, who's a rocket scientist or aeronautical engineer. She's the first woman to receive a PhD in mechanical engineering from Howard University. First African-American woman to receive a PhD in engineering from NASA Goddard Space Center, and so, and these links here are amazing videos and then they get to meet her and, see someone that may perhaps look like them, sound like them, make some type of connection with, so that they can see, hey, if she can do it, I can do it. And so again, introducing those STEM pathways, this particular slide here, this came from kids, because when I would say, okay, today we're going to work as an aeronautical engineer, the first question I would get, hands down, how much money do they make? Like, what? Like, okay. And so I would be like, you know what? I want to have you to look that up. Tell us, come back to us, let us know how much money do they make. What do you need to do? You need to go to college. Get a bachelor's degree. Well, how many years does that take? And these are questions that kids have. especially if they haven't had exposure, to college or, so you have to be able to be ready to answer those questions. Well, college takes about 4 to 5 years, to get a degree in something that you're interested and passionate about. And so that's where this particular slide came from. It comes from kids, and their questions. And so why not, incorporate that in their learning. This particular activity, take a look at those materials. Now, I know I'm about 3 minutes over. You guys can bear with me for about 2 to 3 more minutes, then we'll be all good. Again, low cost, low budget materials, balloons, straws, aluminum foil, cups, index cards. I mean, very small, low budget, low cost materials, and something that they can use to measure time, because they will be documenting their rate of descent. And then group roles. For this particular activity, you want them to work in teams. So you want to divide the class into groups of 3 or 4, and then you can even use this as a sample that they can use for their roles that they'll be in charge of. Helping to divide the work more equally is what it's all about, and it reduces the chance of one group member kind of taking over, the entire challenge, which could be a deterrent for learning for other members of the group. You can have students, self-assign. They love doing that. I will put this out and say, okay, you guys figure it out amongst your team. You have a minute, figure out who's going to do what, after I've introduced, what each role is responsible for. And so that is always a really nice way to see, where kids' strengths are, and then even have them, okay, whatever role you had, last week, now you're going to change and do it and pick on another role, so they begin to build their skills. And so this is just a little bit more about, giving kids, helping them to understand about, landing on the moon, how it can be very tricky, that, there's no atmosphere on the moon. And so they can't use they can't use parachutes to help them, land. They have to use a propulsion or an engine to help get them to safely land on the moon. So giving them that background knowledge is essential. And then most importantly, the criteria and the constraints of this particular challenge, the criteria, the things that needs to be done in order for the challenge to be successful, its requirements. And then those constraints are those limitations. And so here, their lander must have at least 1 inflated balloon. And then they must also incorporate landing legs to keep it, stable and upright after they drop it. So after they drop it, it must land on those legs. And I'm saying that like that because the kids are like, legs? So we would talk about these legs and what these legs, could look like. And it must survive a drop test from 2 meters. And the constraints, they can only use the materials that's given to them. And they may not use parachutes or any other items that's going to help to create that drag. Those are just some reminders. And this is just a little bit more about, them understanding and defining the problem that they're going to need to make a lander, again, without the use of parachutes. For some reason, my screen's not advancing. Hold on a sec. So here you want to give them opportunities to imagine the solutions, and I'm going to point out here, if you take a look at this picture where the kids are kind of sharing their ideas, you want each student to come up with their own initial design. So they can have a voice within this, construction or in the engineering process, right? And then, as they're sharing, they can come up with a consensus as to either which one would they build Or they might even come up with a hybrid of ideas. And that happens a lot. Kids actually come up with a hybrid, like, we like her idea, we like his idea, we like my idea. Okay, here's another sheet of paper. Come up with an idea that incorporates all of your ideas. And so, you want to give them a chance to create those sketches. And these are some actual sketches that kids did. And I want to show, that and I mean, they come up with everything, when, at first they would just come up with a sketch. And then you have to kind of go back and say, hey, I should be able to pick this up and I should be able to build it. So what do you need to do? They'll say, oh, we need to label it. Thank you. Label every piece so anyone can be able to pick up your design and build it from scratch. So those type of things, to help push the thinking even further. And then as they, it's time to build it. So after they've come up with their design, they build it. And then as they're building it, they're putting those construction ideas together, coming up with these amazing design ideas. Then it's time to test it. They're going to test it with the balloon intact, with the air, and then test it as the balloon is open, as the air is releasing. You can see some of their tests here. And then improvement, making it better. They, as a team, identified 2 areas to make your lander design. How can it be more improved? And I think that's where the learning really kicks in. How are we going to make it better? And then they make it better. And then they're able to, share and reflect and explain what worked, what didn't work. And here's some great reflection questions that go along with it. What surprised you most about the performance of your lander? On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate how your lander performed? And then uploading, giving them opportunity to share and post. They love that. I use something called Padlet, where the kids can take pictures of their ideas and yes, really great reflection questions. Post their ideas and share their learning with everyone. And this is just a screenshot of some of their posts. Again, they love to post it. And with one thing about this, I'm not endorsing anything, but it's just something that I use. But one thing about this in particular, that you can post videos and pictures. And so the kids really like to be able to take a little video and post it up as well. And last but not least, I'm not going to show the video. I thought I was going to have time, but this video here is an instructional video as for you, the educator, to help you give you some ideas on how to make this, work in the classroom. What would this particular activity look like in a classroom? I definitely wouldn't show this to the kids. I just use it for me. So for me I can understand, how to, create my own lunar lander and what type of expectations. But I'm going to put this link in here so you can kind of see this activity as it kind of unfolds. But again, this is just, one of my favorite activities to do with kids. And they really, as you can see probably from the images, they really, really get a kick out of it. And it's really, really a great way to engage kids in utilizing and implementing the engineering design process. It's the engineering design process at work. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and move us to the closeout. Thank you so much for staying a little bit extra. Thank you. And I'm going to put the link here. Now, if you notice here, you can download everything. Right here, you see about 8 things you can download, but I'm going to go ahead and put the link here to the Google Drive, where you can access everything on the Google Drive as well. And right now, I didn't get a chance to actually put the actual slide deck presentation on the Google Drive, but I'm going to do that now. So, but with that, if you have any questions, especially about this particular activity, feel free to email me. You can email me, latina.taylor@nasa.gov. Yes, it is an awesome engineering design process activity. And it's a way to, bring Artemis into the classroom. a way for them to connect. And so I actually used the first part of that presentation with kids. So I introduce Artemis, and then we go right into, building this lander, that will land on the moon. And so it's such a great way. And so thank you guys so much again for coming in this evening. Again, feel free to please email me. I am available to ask and answer any questions that you have. So with that, have a good evening, everyone.